Hey art nerds! Today we are putting Artist Loft's newer alcohol markers to the test. I say newer because they're not new. They've been on the market for a couple of years. And they are sort of a reimagining of their original marker, which was based off the current color body. This is based off of just a pretty basic generic marker body. And you guys have seen me review the Studio 71 markers, as well as the hashtag coloring markers, and I also reviewed these in that review. So if you are interested, you should go check that out. But I liked them well enough that I was willing to do a full-scale field test. So here we have our field test illustration. I have scanned this. It is a line art that is now available to my wonderful art nerds on Patreon. So if you want to color along, join the Patreon community, check out my backer goodies, print this out using a toner printer, and you're ready to go. So I have a fair selection of these markers. They were purchased open stock at Michael's here and there. They are generally $3.99 each, which I think is kind of overpriced for a marker that's trying to be a Copic competitor. And just real quick, I'm gonna mention the Blick Studio Brush markers. I am not sponsored by them. I'm not affiliated with Blick in any way whatsoever, but their Studio Brush markers are very comparable to Copics. They are refillable. They have replaceable nibs. They come in about 96 colors, and they have a foam rubber brush. They cost about $2.85, less if you get them in sets. Whereas the Artist Loft markers we're going to take a look at today are $3.99 each. They're not refillable. You cannot replace the nibs, which is a shame because they have compressed fiber nibs, and these things are really prone to fraying, as you guys will probably see when we dive in. So what I want to do today is I am going to do, now normally with these sort of field tests I do the whole thing in time lapse and then I go over my notes with you guys. What I think I'm going to do today is I'm just going to do the whole thing with y'all. Because I know a lot of people are using inexpensive markers. They might be using the Artist Loft marker. So while this is a field test, it's going to be a field test tutorial. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put some color in the background. So I am using B1 Pastel Blue. And normally I would say put a buffer piece of paper behind this, but this is going straight on the chipboard, so I'm not worried about that. So I'm going to do some of this very light blue color at the tops of her eyes. If you don't like that harsh transition, you can use a little bit of N1, which is their neutral color, just to kind of push it back. I will warn you guys, these are very wet markers. Just given how the nib works, they're going to dump a lot of juice onto your page, a lot of solvent, a lot of color. So you're going to want to keep that in mind. Blending could be a problem. We are working today on Strathmore 300 series mixed media paper. This is my default for when I do alcohol marker reviews. This is the paper you're generally going to see me use. So what I'm going to do is I am applying kind of a halo of this blue around Kara. And then I'm going to push some of that color back using the Colorless Blender. Now you're going to want to be careful because since this is a felt tip marker, it's not a foam rubber, it's felt. First of all, the fumes are already really strong. I have literally just uncapped this marker and it's already getting kind of whippy in here. So if you are sensitive to strong scents, if alcohol markers make you kind of sick, these are going to make you kind of sick. So these would be a marker to avoid if you're sensitive to strong smells. And fortunately, they sell them open stock at Michael's, so you can kind of, I'm not saying like huff markers. Please don't say Nattosoup / Becca Hilburn told you to huff markers. But you can kind of go and see if, just like they sometimes will put scrap paper out for people to experiment with, you can go and see if these markers are going to be a little bit strong for you before you buy them. They're also a little bit scratchy on the paper. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I'm wearing a lavalier mic, so maybe not. That's an easy enough fix. You guys probably heard that. Hopefully you did. Next, I'm going to use our N1 blender. What? The nib on this might not be compressed felt. It feels and sounds different. Kind of feels like foam rubber. So something I'd noticed at my Michaels, and I didn't really think much of it because that particular Michaels often has kind of problems, was their Artist Loft markers. A lot of them had fallen out of stock. Like they hadn't restocked a lot of the colors. It was looking super picked over. Markers didn't have labels on them. It just looked like a mess. And maybe what they're doing now, not that the whole store looks like a mess, but that section looked like a mess, and they often let their inexpensive stuff kind of start to look a little rough. Maybe Artist Loft is switching out or discontinuing that particular type of Artist Loft marker. Now they did have a lot of the Artist Loft markers in sets, so who knows, maybe that's a more lucrative model for them. I will say that charging $3.99 for these markers is not gonna see, you're not gonna have a Copic competitor with these. And people have complained in the past that I compare almost all markers to Copic, regardless of the price point. The reason for that is most people are familiar with Copic. Either they've used them, or they know someone who uses them, or they can find a very quick review of it. So I just kind of use it as a basic default. Also, when I buy markers, I am generally buying markers for the long haul. So I keep that in mind when I review markers, whether or not I think the markers will be useful for a long-term collection. But a more apt comparison, whoa, did I get it all over my hands? A more apt comparison would be to the Blick Studio brush markers, because those are a store brand marker. They're made by Blick, they're distributed by Blick. These are made by Artist Loft, they're distributed through Michaels. The Blick Studio brush markers are cheaper, they're refillable, you can replace the nibs. Cannot do any of those things with these. So that would be a better comparison. So next we're going to take E14 Pearl. Oh dear, that's not good. This is much pinker than the chisel nib swatch. We'll just roll with it. Kara's just going to be weird colored today. And I'll show you guys, these are the swatches. So this is what I thought the color would look like. Maybe after it dries completely, it will look like that again. As it is, it's definitely too pink for Kara. And this was a new marker purchased open stock in store, and the tip is already getting frayed. No, it's not. It's one I already own. Never mind. Wow. Well, it has been used to do this swatch, and it has been used to do my unbox and swatch video. And it's already getting frayed and seems like it's kind of running dry. Now that's the risk you run with any open stock markers in a store. So that's just something to be aware of when you're buying your markers open stock. Test them, check out the nibs. Part of the problem I had yesterday is some of the markers I initially grabbed, and I'll show you guys, they were already kind of pre-wrecked. Let's call them pre-broken in. They're pre-broken in. Someone had broken them in for me, and I couldn't buy a fresher one that wasn't all rickety-wrecked because there were no other markers in that category. That was the only one of its color. So you can see we've left some little islands of white, and now we're going over and doing a second layer with pearl. I'll tell you guys something else. So I teach marker classes with Copic, or rather, sorry, I teach marker classes with Plaza. I apologize for that. which is an art supply chain in this area, and they have me using Copic. That's where I was going with that. And it's $25 to take the class. You get the benefit of my experience one-on-one, and you get to play with Copics all day. So I think that's a really affordable way to play with Copic markers. Decide if you like them before you invest in a bunch of them. Okay, next we're gonna use powder, which is YR14. And see, it doesn't quite line up the way I wanted it to on this paper, but that's okay. We're gonna deal with it. We're gonna make it work. And that is a concept. If you're gonna use cheap art supplies, that's a concept you gotta get used to, because there's a lot of just making it work. And of course, I'm pretty decent with other brands of markers, not just Copic. So I am actually not completely displeased with the two colors together, so I'm going to kind of leave that. I'm not going to blend it out too much. We're going to go in next with R2, which is blush. I've noticed that I mostly use the brush end when I use markers. It's easier on my early onset arthritis, and it kind of lets me get in and do what I want to do. Now, when the brushes start fraying, they do become a lot more difficult to use. You may even opt to use the chisel nib. I find the chisel nib personally to be just a little bit more finicky than I would like. Now, these are bleeding out a lot. These things put out a lot of ink. It's going to stay wet for a while. So I'm going to give that a chance to dry, because if you want a sharper transition, you let your inks evaporate. And we're gonna start on the flower. Now, silly me, I didn't really pick up a lot of good greens, so I'm gonna be using YG11, BG15, and BG16. So we're gonna start with YG11. And Kara is holding a peony. So I'm doing the YG at the top where the sunlight would be hitting it. So we're going to apply a little bit of color theory and get the most out of our colors. And then I'm going to go in with BG15. I have to be really delicate with these because they are very prone to just kind of bleeding. And we are working on a fairly thirsty paper as well. So what's kind of neat about these is if you live near a Michael's, you have access to these. And they're much cheaper than their Copics. Michael's Copics are super expensive, totally not worth that price. And since I bought them open stock, I couldn't really use a coupon, a coupon on them. So I went back in with my YG11 just to kind of blend that out a bit. I'm going to do another layer of BG15. But if you bought them as a set, you could use a coupon. But honestly, if you got a good coupon, like a 40% off coupon, use it for something nicer. I am a big proponent of you buy nice art supplies as an investment, which I know is not feasible for everybody and not really everybody's cup of tea. I respect that. Okay, now BG16, but that's where I'm coming from when I review stuff, is how long is it gonna last you? And for me, refillable markers last a really long time because I can maintain them. Alright, I'm gonna let that dry. We're getting really smooth blends, but it's also, whoo, dem fumes. So I'm gonna let that dry. We're gonna go back over to her skin and we're gonna use E16. Actually, what did we just use? We used YR14, and I am referencing something I have just slightly off camera. Wait, sorry about that. We're gonna do E4 first. And then we're gonna blend it out with the color that went down prior. So that would be R2. And with these marker videos, sometimes it's a challenge to come up with stuff that like will look good, tests the markers that I have, doesn't require me to buy a bunch of new markers, and still kind of fits my, you know, I always try to promote my work with 7-inch Kara. It's my webcomic. You can read it at 7inchkara.com or 7inchkara.tumblr.com. So I draw Kara a lot because honestly, I should be promoting my own stuff. So I usually go for Kara themed stuff. It's a little bit darker than I thought it would be. These markers are surprising in that the chisel end, which I use for all my swatches, because that's what Copic recommends if you want a consistent swatch color and you really want to get a good idea of what the color is going to be, they recommend using the chisel nib. But the color is sometimes significantly different between the chisel nib on these and the brush tip, and I don't know why, because with with pigment-based markers it makes sense since things kind of sediment out. Maybe it's the way they were stored, but they were stored horizontally, so unfortunately I'm running out of good guesses. But see, that's something I ding markers for, because I want color consistency. We're going to go back now with our YR14 and kind of blend that out. I want colors to give me predictable results. I want to know what color I'm getting. I do like surprises, but I like knowing about my surprises, if that makes sense. Okay, so we'll give that a chance to dry, and we're gonna go back in on our peony with BG16. And I'm already having bleeding problems, so I'm trying to kind of stay away from areas I've already colored. And the combination of the blue greens and the yellows makes for a really nice bright green. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. Good color mixability gains you points from me. So we're gonna go in next. Let's go in with V5. It might be, no, I'm gonna check it out. We're gonna do V20, which is much lighter, and it might push the color back, we'll see. So I'm doing this as just kind of a shadow color. I'm not gonna do it everywhere. It just kind of neutralizes some colors. Gives us kind of a cast shadow effect. I'm going to use our greens. On her little beads. Now these are a little bit difficult to uncap, but they do seem to have a nice airtight seal, so at least you won't have dead markers to contend with. Then I'm going to go in with E17, Praline, and do Freckles. And with these markers, once the tip starts to go, it gets really hard to do this sort of detail work. So, of all my alcohol marker tutorials and reviews, including the ones over on the blog, which ones are your favorite? Let me know. I'll try to do more like that. Like, what style of review is your favorite? What marker tests were your favorite? Just give me all the deets. I'm always looking to grow while continuing to offer a service. And that's what I think this is. I definitely think doing these kinds of reviews is a service. I enjoy doing it though. Okay, now I'm going to do something a little bit different than what I normally do with her hair. I'm going to... Actually, let's start with E6. I do like building up contrast. And this one was another new marker, and it is also already mushy. Somebody was not very kind in Michael's. Of course, these are kind of delicate as it is, so with these, it's not hard to kind of ruin the tip. Okay, and we're leaving a little bit of a highlight. I like to vary up how I do my highlights. And I'll give that a chance to kind of evaporate. So while that evaporates, I'm going to switch over now to the peony that she's holding, and we're going to start with R3 peony, which is the color that inspired this, and it is pretty saturated. So what I want to do is I'm going to knock some of it back, soften it a little bit. It's partially how I get kind of a painterly effect. So we don't have, well, we do have some lighter pink colors, but what I was thinking about using was the blender, sort of the way I used the blender in my Neo Pico review to knock the roses back a little bit. But you can also use a lighter pink or even one of the peachy colors if you want to add that to your peony. I encourage you guys to experiment, play around with it, kind of figure it out for yourselves. So I'm leaving a bit of a white highlight for right now. And I'm going to go in with a lighter color and kind of blend that out so that we get a soft watercolory effect. And already my brush nib is getting pretty frayed and worn out. So that's the number one. The smell is pretty strong, but it's the number one thing I have a complaint about with these, is that the frayed tip really shortens the lifespan of the product, at least for people like me. Now, I first picked these up not even to review them. I actually bought them to kind of augment my convention alcohol marker stash. I wanted markers that if somebody stole them, I'd be sad, of course, because lost, wasted money, but it wouldn't be like losing more expensive markers. So my con markers are a lot of Blick Studio brush markers, which I love. I would be sad if somebody stole them, but you know, I can replace them fairly easily. And also these. And I wasn't going to do a review of them, but then I started teaching marker classes, and my students want more affordable options, and I wanted to explore that. Okay, so I'm going to take E10. I want to at least be able to tell them what to avoid. I'm going to zoom in on our hair so you can better see what I'm doing. But really, my favorite is when I have a dark horse that other people haven't yet discovered. So for a while it was the Blick Studio brush markers were kind of my dark horse. I love recommending underappreciated, inexpensive art supplies. That's my jam. I know sometimes I might come across as like really hard to please with really high expectations, but what I really want is just to find good stuff that's affordable, and also encourage people to invest in nice art supplies instead of just what's cheap. Find stuff that works with you, not against you. Of all the cheap markers I reviewed, if we're not talking about the Blick Studio brush markers, which are my favorite, as you guys know, these are not bad. These are not the worst. They do kind of remind me of the Peter Popper markers that I reviewed a really long time ago, and I didn't like them. I thought they were terrible, but these are a little bit better than those. And of course, I would say it goes without mentioning, but it doesn't go without mentioning. These were purchased out of my own pocket. Okay, we're going back to R3, doing another layer of color on the peony. So all opinions are my own. They come from years of reviewing art supplies and alcohol markers. That's kind of how I first got, I don't want to say, I'm not popular. I've never really been popular, but that and how to be a con artist are generally how people know me. Are my marker reviews and my con stuff. So, you know, my opinions are based on those experiences. And it's also very heavily influenced by the kind of work, the kind of art that I make. So your experiences may vary from mine. Your needs may differ from mine. I recognize that. I am not even going to begin to address that because there are so many different ways to do things. I can't possibly, going back now to E6, which was the base color for the hair, I can't possibly address every single different way of doing things because there are as many ways to do things as there are people in the world. So I am not even going to try. Alright, now I'm going to go in with R4 Azalea. I also don't want you guys to think that I think my way is the only way to do things. That is not at all how I feel. I think that's maybe sometimes how I come across, and if that's the case, I really apologize because I do try to acknowledge that my way is certainly not the only way and that I've learned a lot from many other artists and from watching other artists, but I do recognize that there's always room for improvement and that I can always stand to improve myself. And based on the colors that I've purchased, I don't know that I'll really be able to get a lot more contrast. Maybe if I bring in a little bit of Red Rose, which is a dark red color, but I feel like it's going to kind of clash with the pink that we've already put down. So I'm not going to worry about that one. Next, we're going to take E18 Coffee. This was the last coffee they had, And you can tell I'm a coffee fiend because I was willing to take the last one, even though the brush looks terrible. And again, since these are not refillable and the ooh, it's so mushy. Who did this to you, brush? Since it's not refillable and the nibs are not replaceable, that's kind of a big deal. You don't want to buy something broken. Unless they're going to give you a deal on it, and we all know that is not Michael's business model. Okay, so that put down a lot of color, and it was a little bit uncontrolled because it is already pretty rickety wrecked. So that is just something to be aware of. That once these markers start to go, they probably go downhill really quick. They are somewhat difficult to uncap. I had more trouble, I believe, with the with the Artex markers. So a little bit easier than that. They have not yet become a problem with my arthritis. They're large, but they're fairly comfortable to hold in the hand. The triangular body keeps them from rolling away off your desk. So if those are properties that are important to you, that's all something to keep in mind. And I'm going to go back in again with V5, which is lavender. Their color family system is really simple. It is a letter representing that color family and then a number kind of representing, I guess, intensity. Next we're going to do B66 Iris. Which always makes me think of the Goo Goo Dolls. I do struggle with some of the caps though, so that's definitely something to consider. And we're going to do Iris for her skirt as well, at least as a base color for her skirt. I feel like these are fairly simple to use, straightforward markers. I'm getting good coverage, decent color saturation. The color range isn't bad. They're fairly blendable. If they were cheaper, like a lot cheaper, I would recommend them as kind of like my budget buy. But $3.99 each is pretty, I think it's pretty hefty when you're comparing them to other markers on the market, and it just doesn't really impress me all that much. Again, there are cheaper markers, a little less accessible, but if you can order online, that's going to greatly open up what you can buy. I think these cost about the same as Prismacolor markers, and Prismacolor markers have a better brush nib than this. They are also disposable, non-refillable though. That's something else that is worth mentioning. In general, outside of my reviewing art supply life, I try to be, a little bit respectful of our environment. I try not to purchase things that are just going to go in the trash. So the fact that these are not refillable, they're not designed to be refillable, they're not reusable, when there are markers that are designed to be reusable and refillable and last for a really long time, that's another notch down. This one has that other, what are you? Sorry, like, it's different, alright? It's got a different tip to it. Of course you can't write to Michael's and ask, because they're not going to tell. But some of these feel and sound like they're made from something different. And it's the ones I bought yesterday. So if any of you art nerds feel like doing some sleuthing or work for Michael's and know the inside scoop, please let me know. Are they switching out the markers? Have they reformulated them? Are we getting foam rubber tips instead of the gross fiber tips? If you know, let me know. So we did B66 and then B14, which is a dark blue purple for her skirt. I think we are almost finished. I'll be curious to hear what you guys think in the comments below. Again, these colors were purchased open stock. I think they're fairly blendable though, and I'm not dissatisfied with the blends that I've been able to achieve, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. Do you love these markers? Do you hate these markers? Share your stories, and again, if you've got the inside scoop, I want to hear that too. I'm gonna go in and add just a little bit of lavender to the peony just to add some contrasts and some lowlights. It's gonna give it a little bit more depth, but otherwise I think we're done, save for doing some highlights with Signo, which really doesn't have anything to do with the review. I just like making my art look cute, okay y'all? Gosh. So these aren't bad. I think some of these markers have switched over to to foam rubber. And it's a very, very mushy foam rubber. It's not super different handling wise from the others. I'm gonna set this aside for just a moment and we're gonna get like all up on top of it. Give me a sec. Okay, we have 3 markers here. We have B1, V5, and E18, and I know somebody's watching this and cringing. I am sorry, but you know it's gotta be done. So, this one has what I think might be the new tip. This one I know is the compressed fiber because it's starting to fray. This one is also compressed fiber. So, I'm gonna grab a scrap sheet of paper. We're gonna get to scribbling. Okay, so we're gonna let's start with our known quantity first, right? Okay. Let me see if I can get it to focus. Okay. So, decent color lay down, but you guys see the tip starts to get a little bit white, especially when you try to flex it. It just doesn't have much give to it. And that starts to wear the marker down. That's really evident in coffee, where we can see the tip is already frayed. And when you put it down, it mushes it and frays it more. So these things do not have any real flex to them, and then it gets beaten up, and then it just kind of sadly mushes out, and you can't draw a straight line with it anymore. It's all like soft and fuzzy. Like I basically just ruined coffee by showing you guys that. And that's probably what somebody did in Michael's. They probably are a brush letter. They're looking for flexible brush markers and they flexed it. That is a reasonable thing to do. Okay, now we have our unknown quantity, which when we flex it, it doesn't go completely white. It doesn't get all beaten up. And then when we flex it, it doesn't get like coffee did. It starts to look kind of like how Copic does when you've overextended the Copic marker. If you guys know what I'm talking about, it's okay if not. So we're gonna grab coffee again. So this is coffee. I basically put it through the same paces as I put this one. And lavender, is that the right color? Lavender, it holds up a lot better. Let's try another. I'm not like out to ruin all these markers, but I bought them to review, so we're gonna review them. Okay, this is another one I think might have a different tip, a new tip to it. Yeah, I'm like really beating it up and it's doing okay. So basically what this boils down to, if Artist Loft is replacing the, oh wow, sorry, having trouble recapping. Okay, if Artist Loft is replacing the nibs with a new foam rubber nib, they need to let us know, because that changes my opinion of these markers. I still don't think they are the best thing since sliced bread, but I do think if you can get the newer markers that have the better, more flexible tip, the more resilient tip that isn't going to fray on you, then they are probably worth $3.99 and certainly worth buying in packs and getting them on a deal. Even though they are not refillable, and that is still a problem for me, they are very accessible. Most people have a Michaels in their area or can get to a Michaels in their area, and they could be great for younger artists who want to get comfortable with alcohol markers. If they have a foam rubber nib, that's going to make them similar to the Blick Studio brush markers and to the Copic markers. So I could much more easily recommend them to you guys if that is the case. However, if we are still going to be dealing with the compressed fiber, I have a lot of caveats. You guys saw how much coffee got beaten up. You saw that it can no longer draw a nice clean line. Let's see, lavender still can. So I'm really kind of thinking somewhere along the line they're switching out the nibs, and I really hope it is for the foam rubber, because those are so much better. But if they're not, these are going to get beaten up really fast, and I really recommend you get Prismacolors or you get Blick Studio brush markers over these. However, if these are actually the way of the future, I would put them almost on the same page as I put my Prismacolors. I would say use them interchangeably. I would even think about throwing them in with my Copic markers, where I just grab markers and use them. So the nib, for me, really makes all the difference. Okay, let's put some finishing touches on this cute little illustration here. I'm going to use a white Signo, and I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I feel like we really learned a lot today. We have a lot to think about, a lot to consider. I really hope I hear from either a Michaels Artist Loft rep or someone who works at Michaels who would know and is willing to speak to it. If it's like a matter of anonymity and you don't want to go on record saying it, you can DM me on Twitter. That's really my preferred method of contact. You can also message me through my email. That will also work. But I really want to know. I'm super curious now. And I'm just adding a really easy little pattern using dots. So what did you guys think? Are you into these markers? Are you going to turn around and go buy some? Are you going to pass? Is there another really cheap brand of brush markers that you really like and you want me to check them out? They don't have to be cheap. I actually prefer reviewing nice markers because I like, believe it or not, I like saying nice things about art supplies. I go with cheap because that's what people are most interested in seeing. They want to either see like an epic art disaster, or they want to see like a phoenix rise from the ashes of trash. Okay, I think we are about done. So, I'm on the fence about these Artist Loft markers. If they're switching the nibs over to something that's a little bit more sturdy, a little bit more resilient, I think they're not bad. If we're still gonna be dealing with mushy compressed fiber though, I would say pass. You have to be really desperate. They can be good if you're in a pinch, like you're doing a show and you forgot your alcohol markers, or you're traveling, or maybe you want to do a 3-color challenge and you don't own any markers at all. They can be good for that. They can also be good if you want a very limited selection of markers. You don't think you're going to use alcohol markers often. You do want a few because they look fun and you just kind of want to see if these are for you. But I do think they're kind of expensive for that. They are $3.99 open stock. So what I would say, if you don't own any yet, is pick up a set. They have loads of sets of 6. I say get it with a coupon, although I will also say if you have a coupon for Michaels, there are other nicer things you could be spending your money on, but you know, that's all up to you. It's really about you doing what's best for you. So hopefully I have provided the information you guys need to make the best decision that you can make for you and for your art, because you know you and you know your own art. But I want to thank you guys so much for joining me today, helping me color this really cute little doodle of Kara using Artist Loft markers. I hope I gave you guys some food for thought, something to think about. You guys can find links down in the description below where you can get these markers, but you can just go into your local Michaels, as well as to some of the other markers I have mentioned in the video. Keep an eye on the cards in this video because I will have linked things throughout. And if you're in the Nashville area and you'd like to learn more about using alcohol markers, sign up for one of my marker classes through Nashville Plaza. You can find information in the description for that as well. If you like what I do and you want to help me do it, hit the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications, join me on Friday nights for our Power Hour, and ask me questions about art supplies. I will see you guys again really soon. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye guys!